On this episode of War Docs, we speak with the Senior Enlisted Leader for the Defense Health Agency, Chief Master Sgt. Tanya Y. Johnson. Chief Johnson talks about her family's legacy of military service and describes her own journey in Air Force medicine over multiple decades. She explains how her background as a clinical laboratory technician and other diverse roles prepared her strategic leadership in the DHA, addressing the administration of the TRICARE Health Plan and executing the DHA's Combat Support Activity mission. Chief Johnson provides insights into her leadership philosophy and stresses the importance of leading with grace. She offers valuable advice for those beginning or considering careers in military medicine. Find out more about Chief Johnson and our previous guests on our website, wardocspodcast.com. And make sure you follow War Docs on your preferred podcast platform and subscribe to our War Docs YouTube channel. I'm your host, Dr. Doug Soderdahl, retired Army urologist, and I'm joined today by my co-host, retired Major General and family physician, Dr. Jeff Clark.
Welcome to War Docs, the military medicine podcast. This show brings you a first-hand, behind-the-scenes look into the mission, unique opportunities, and deployed experiences of the entire military healthcare team. From state-of-the-art hospitals in the United States to the most austere environments across the globe, War Docs has you covered.
Today we're privileged to welcome the Senior Enlisted Leader for the Defense Health Agency, Chief Master Sgt. Tanya Y. Johnson, to War Docs. Chief Johnson, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to come and talk with you and the team.
Chief Johnson, it's good to see you as always, and we greatly appreciate you taking the time to be on War Docs. Why don't we start with, if you just tell us a little bit about your background, how you grew up, and how you ended up joining our Air Force.
I was actually born into a military family. My father was an airman. He actually was a medic. So I was born into the military health system. So this is what I know. I was born at one of our military treatment facilities at Wilford Hall at Lackland Air Force Base. That kind of, I will tell you, shaped a lot of what you get today and how I am and how I operate. It was really heavily based off of that background and growing up, witnessing that firsthand as a dependent, and then now to be an active duty member and a mother that had children in our system. It just is, I'm honored and humbled to be able to have that kind of journey that leads me here to where I am today.
So did you feel like you were just following in your family's footsteps, or was there something specific you said, you know what, I really want to join the Air Force?
I will be very, very candid. There was never a question about whether or not I would serve. It was when I would serve. And so I thought that I would go to college like everybody says that they will, be an officer and do those things. And I was really the kid that didn't want to go to class. And I had a curfew at 20, living with my parents, and I didn't want that anymore. And I remember coming home, having the conversation with Dad, like, I want to do this. I know that I want to do something medical. I just hadn't pinpointed out. My dad goes, that's smart. You want to be inside when it's cold and inside when it's hot. So make good choices. And the ADVAB scores led me to medical. And then I came in as a clinical laboratory. And so I did kind of that research into it. And at the beginning, I was like, I'll do 4 years, I'll finish college, I'll commission. And about a year and a half in, I knew that I was going to stay enlisted. I knew this was it, right? And as people still now today come back and talk to me, there was never a plan outside of 30 years. Like, what are you going to do? I'm going to serve 30 years. I'm going to be a Chief Master Sergeant. And that was the plan. There was no backup plan. So thank God that it all worked out for me.
Well, I know that the secret unwritten motto of the Air Force is be inside when it's hot and be inside when it's cold. So congratulations on making the right pick there. It doesn't always work out for the Army.
I was ready for it. I knew you were going to poke me in the eye about it. Yeah. I mean, that's good choices. This is what I say.
That's right. There you go. With your extensive background and experience since joining the Air Force in 1993, how has those past roles contributed to your current leadership approach and how you make decisions in the DHA and the role that you're in now?
One was growing up as a military sprout. I say sprout because we kind of learn to grow where you're planted. And when I actually came in active duty, I started to, those things that you learn, like manage your expectations, you're going to move, you're going to have new friends, you're going to get new leadership. That's going to be forever changing. Don't get too comfortable, right? Not in a way that you aren't comfortable with your job and knowing what you're doing, but don't get comfortable and complacent. That helped quite a bit. And I will tell you that because of that experience, it helped me with my decision making. I came from a military family. What many people don't know, besides obviously General Crosland, who did my interview, is that I lost my parents within the system too, for things that arguably could have been preventable, right? And when I think about the war fighter and their families, those things shape like decision making for me. Like, how is the airman, soldier, sailor that is now the parent to the parent navigating the system? What are they going through? How is the single mom, because I was a single mom the majority of my career, how are they coping with deployments and then sick kids and all of those things? And it weighed so heavy on me when I was younger. But as I started to get in the conversation where I felt like I had a voice to make a difference, all of that goes day to day in the decision making, is trying to meet people where they are. Because I go back to that foundational things like, what is the expectation? What would I expect? What is okay in how you treat people? Just common courtesy, and give grace where grace is needed. And that just kind of, it stays with me. Everybody always asks me, like, what's your leadership style? I've captured different things through different mentors throughout the years and kind of built on that, what right looks like to me. And this, keeping that, always going back to the foundation. How was I raised? What did I see, at home? And my father served, but my grandfather served and uncles served. And for a long time, I was the only female that served, and kind of translating that to that perspective. And another single soldier, sailor, airman, how would they be dealing with that, and how would they navigate that, and what kind of example would I want to show them?
Similar to that, the way I started doing it was I would think, what does PFC Clark think about this, right? Where's PFC Clark and his family coming from? So I can relate to that. And I think that's a very healthy and a good way to approach things. Some in our audience may not understand the role of the senior enlisted leader, and specifically your role as a senior enlisted leader for the Defense Health Agency. Can you kind of talk about that for us?
For the audiences, I'm an advisor to the director, right? But more specifically, I advise her on matters that are that involve enlisted, the enlisted perspective. What a lot of our civilian counterparts don't realize is 75% of our medical structure are enlisted members, and understanding how the decisions we make impact them, making sure that those things are taken into consideration, making sure that I'm clearing the path so they can focus on what we need them to focus on. And that's taking care of those that we are privileged to serve, right? And how I can remove obstacles. And I will tell you, I have been blessed with General Crosland as the director, because I'm on the leadership team. It doesn't matter that I'm enlisted. She goes back and says, you've got 30 years of experience, and how do you bring that to the conversation and make us look at it from a different lens? I can be a little unorthodox, and I can be a lot bossy. And so that helps in the dynamic where I can kind of sit back and watch the room, and I can go places in the organization that the director can't, and really get, how did our decision really impact the team at the deck plate, right? We made that decision, but did it really translate the way that we thought that it would? And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And being able to come back and communicate that, or just simply communicating our mission and vision in words that they understand, right? And so when we're sitting around the table, I will candidly say, okay, that sounds like words to me. How do I explain this to an E3 or E4? And getting that grace back, and taking that feedback in the decision making is kind of where I kind of land in the team.
How do you develop that trust in those folks that you want them to tell you what's really going on, rather than saying everything's hunky-dory? So how do you get them to tell you really what's happening?
I think that people don't care about what I know unless they know how much I care. And I go in there unemotional. It's easy to try to defend what you made and what the decision was. And sometimes we just got to listen, like talk less, listen more. And I try to do that in the majority of my engagements, just so that I can really get the feedback that we need. And if you're consistent and accountable enough in the reputation, that you build, it followed me. And I'm so thankful for that. And I continue to be that way. And I don't know any other way to be. And so I just continue to listen, put myself in their shoes, be transparent all the time. I'm like kind of my motto is team. So when it's like transparency, empowering them and, supporting them while they're going through that, giving them the opportunity to fail, but know that they have me to catch them. So it's not like a sentinel event or anything. Accountability. I'm going to hold myself accountable, but they know I'm going to hold them accountable. And then I'm going to try to make a difference. Right. And I have been that way for years. I've always put that analogy forward, and that consistency has garnered me the trust that it's humbling, actually.
So the Defense Health Agency, the DHA strategy to stabilize and modernize is an aggressive plan to guide the MHS, the military health system, and ensure its nearly 10 million beneficiaries have patient-centered, good access, and high-quality care. Can you just briefly summarize that strategy and what does the end state look like for military medicine?
I'm excited about the strategy. I think that our beneficiaries deserve nothing less. They deserve nothing less. By and large, I feel like healthcare in the United States, not just in military medicine, but healthcare in the United States is largely focused on the provider's perspective and what they need and how you come into our doors, we do something, we send you home, and but we're not meeting you in the space of health to keep you from really coming through those doors, right? And I think that our new strategy is we stabilize the system because they deserve that. We've had so much churn over the last 5 years between transition of military treatment facilities, a pandemic, and conflict around the world, all those things. We couldn't cheat. We couldn't stop any of those things. We couldn't take any of these medics. So we have to go back and see during that time what gaps were left behind. And then because healthcare is at an inflection point in the United States, how do we modernize and put tools in the hands? Because let's just be candid, we don't have the same provider pool that we had in military medicine or at our civilian counterparts, and we're competing for that. And our strategy really looks at how we get out of after that. So it's different. It's really defining a new model of care where we're not just so focused on workload and readiness. The services have that struggle, right? They're going to focus down and in, and they're going to be ready to get after that part of it. But our side of the conversation and making sure that we're meeting the patient where they're at, right? So I would say we've done it in a thoughtful, deliberate way. On the stabilized side, that's 90% of our focus right now. And those things are, putting tools in people's hands, teaching skill sets, because there is kind of a gap there. We did lose healthcare providers after the pandemic, just like everybody else in the country. And how do we fill that void and give them the tools that they need to be successful? And then in an undisruptive way, we have the modernization where we've pulled out 5 venture sites to really test technology, look away from the traditional metrics, and really drive where we are focused on the patient, not more than just the patient, the person. And I think that's something to be excited about. And if we do this right, we've partnered so well with industry that they will take this back. I think like the whole world is watching. How are we going to do this? How are we going to execute this between now and 2028 without causing churn, without impacting readiness, and then still making people healthy on the journey and taking care of the healthcare providers, the medical professionals as we go. That was a little long, but I'm excited about that. So there's some great things that you're going to see come from military medicine when you come in our doors.
Yeah. You should be excited, Chief. And I'm anybody that's had exposure to what the MHS and DHA is doing is very exciting. And I like the fact that you made reference to the folks that we're privileged to serve as persons, because they're
right.
human beings who happen to come into our doors virtually or otherwise. I'll kind of expand on a couple of things that you mentioned on your background as a clinical laboratory technician, and you've had a variety of other roles. How do you see advancements in medical technology, some of the technologies that are going to be implemented at the 5 venture sites and so forth? How do you see that shaping the future of how we provide healthcare?
I think it's pivotal to our success, right? It's going to help us fill some of the gaps where we don't have personnel. It is going to relieve the burden off of the current team. It is going to really make us step back and reimagine how care is delivered. With our digital first strategy, I say meeting the patient where they are. I mean, truly meeting you where you are. What are the things that keep you healthy? What keeps you outside of our doors? Do you need to see a provider, or you just need something? Is it in like self-care space? And we're looking into those things, and we're partnering with industry, to put that, focusing on helping the healthcare provider be ready, right? And as a lab tech, I am so used to, if you don't update your equipment or machines or technology every 3 years, you're behind. And for us to do this at scale across the enterprise in a thoughtful, disciplined, deliberate way, that's exciting. And I know that that individuals that will watch this will like, what about the other sites? We're going to get there, right? We're moving aggressively because our beneficiaries and our healthcare professionals deserve nothing less. That technology is going to take that temperature down within the doors. It's going to help us get lean and effective. I know that when you think of military medicine, everybody goes to efficiencies and savings. That's not what it's about. It's about us being effective. And if we can do this in an effective way, then we're going to do the best thing that we can do for our patients and our team. And that technology is going to get us there.
So tell me a little bit more. Let's go back to Airman Johnson as a lab tech. What would a lab tech do in a deployed environment? What kind of things that they would expect, that they wouldn't maybe normally see in the hospital that they work in or the lab situation?
I will tell you, it's a team sport when you're deployed for lab, right? Because there's usually only one of you on the ground. And depending on where you are, you're lucky if you have two, because if you have two, that means you have a blood bank and you're doing surgeries and not like a forward operating organization. So lab, I think it's sporty. It's unfortunate. I didn't deploy until I was a senior NCO. And I will tell you, they wanted me to do everything in that building but touch the lab. And just going in there and seeing those machines that you trained on in field training, and how empowered those young airmen were. So you have an E4 that's running a laboratory at a roll 3 sometimes, right? And so if you're at a Kandahar, that's like, you would never do that stateside. And just the empowerment and just the trust and their ability as a scientist, if you will, is just outstanding. And I will tell you, they bring the whole expeditionary medical group, is what we call them in the Air Force. You bring the whole team on it so that you can at least get some sleep, and you're not there 24 hours a day sleeping out of there. So you've got loggies that know how to do it, x-ray techs, you know how to do x-rays. It's just such a broadening experience. It really speaks to the cross-functional technicians that a lot of our services are trying to get after. And so that is just, oh man, I hate that I didn't do it as a junior airman, but I loved every second of it when I was in Ali Asalim and Al Jaber. It was such an experience.
Yeah, I can tell you from my experience, I was always amazed at the amount of responsibility at such a junior rank, and what a great job that they were able to do and provide, because that's the kind of stuff that you need in the middle of nowhere, and they can provide that. It's just amazing. So the DHA administers the TRICARE health plan, and that provides medical, dental, pharmacy programs worldwide to beneficiaries. Can you talk about the challenges and maybe the successes in managing and administering such a comprehensive health plan, especially because the needs are so diverse and the military population is all over the globe? It's not just in one particular area.
Our managed care support contractors, Humana and currently HealthNet and soon to be TriWest, we can't do this without them. We need that partnership. What's the challenge? The challenge is just there's just not enough healthcare professionals anymore. So those places that we used to go to for support just don't exist after the pandemic. And so as they pivot to partner with us and help us offer care in those isolated locations, you think of your Minot Air Force bases, your Cannon Air Force bases, where there's really not a big medical footprint. We really heavily rely on them. Even with our new strategy, they're coming to the table and meeting with us to see how they can better support that, right? As we bring care back into the doors of the MTF so that our medical care teams are ready to go if we have competition or crisis, and then how they help navigate the different platforms and technology on their sides, putting like things like wearables in people's hands, so that as we go forward with our technology and strategy, they can better complement each other. I don't think there's really the challenge. I think that what is harder to overcome is just what isn't available in the communities anymore. And they're suffering from that too, right? And how do we bridge that gap? And how do we better communicate that to our beneficiaries so they realize it's not that our managed care contractors don't want to support them and that TRICARE doesn't care about them. It truly doesn't exist where they are, and that how do we deliver it in a different modality?
Most folks, or many folks, may not appreciate that in addition to the authority, direction, control of delivery of the healthcare mission, the DHA also is a combat support agency, a supporting to supported relationship to combatant commands. And to my knowledge, the only combat support agency that also has a full-time mission to execute something like healthcare, right? That's huge, and I'm not sure everybody appreciates that. Could you talk a little bit about your role as the Senior Enlisted Leader and talk a little bit about DHA's Combat Support Agency mission?
Largely what a lot of people don't know, and I honestly was kind of naive to it before I became a member of the agency team, is that DHA doesn't bring the people to the combat support portion of our portfolio per se. We bring functions and capabilities. And I say, think of it like this. We had the pandemic, so we had the biosurveillance team. We partnered very closely with the medical departments and the services, industry, CDC, and how we executed the vaccination plans, how we went into civilian communities. NORTHCOM is a big support to what happens on the homeland, defend the homeland, right? And so NORTHCOM, partnering with them, getting us to civilian hospitals to help them during that time frame. And then really, if we're in competition or crisis overseas, what is the role for capability? That's our bread and butter in combat support, right? So the casualty collection points when we have wounded that are going to come back stateside from OCONUS or from the theater, how do we have that? And then also, really, where does the TRICARE contract support that? And people don't realize that. We have ISOS overseas, the international support part of the contract. So there are things that need to happen before we even get them stateside. And how do we complement the combatant command's requirements based off of the functions that we have? So we used to use an analogy of the arrowhead to kind of show where we fell. And in the arrow, we were really the spine of the arrow. And depending on what was called for in that crisis, if you will, that depends on where it would line up on the spine of the arrow. For a long time, public health and biosurveillance were closer to the tip of the arrow because of what was going on in our country. And there's always, over the last 25, 30 years that we've been In CENTCOM, there was the blood program office that was really, heavily utilized. And so as we mature those things that we took from the services, that's really what we bring. We did a better job over the last 2 years of defining what those functions were, because what everyone saw is that's the defense health, everything. They do everything health, right? And that wasn't really truly the case. So we've done better about defining those things. We have research and development, education and training in because the MTFs are a training platform as well, right? So we bring all of those capabilities to the fight.
So I think that the military health system clearly learned some things about itself during the pandemic. And I think America really got a chance to see what military medicine could do. What kind of lessons learned, or how has the Defense Health Agency adapted its strategies and resources to focus on the next emerging threat? Whatever that next pandemic, what is the DHA doing to prepare?
Over my 30 years, the focus had always been really on influenza, right? That pandemic plan that we had to be able, nobody saw COVID happening. And there was always a premise that we could always use our civilian hospitals. That would be the overflow. They're going to go there. And it really enlightened us on what capabilities and what people were focused on in the country in that space, right? It did teach us that we needed to go back and look at those Vietnam era old plans that were more conservative plans. It made us look at really what is in the space of public health, what is in the space of biosurveillance, what is the science saying, getting in that conversation sooner rather than later so that we can maximize resource and be able to partner better with just our allies, with our civilian counterparts like CDC. It really made us step back and look at what do we currently have. But we did that so seamlessly and still kept the doors of all of the military treatment facilities open, responded to Operation Allied Welcome and then Allied Refuge. So we did all of those things during that, and those didn't drop. So it showed us that with good plans, with good communication and collaboration, that we can pivot where they need us to in the time of crisis like that. And I think that those playbooks are on the shelf ready for the next event. It has also showed us that we're able to spin and execute. Look at the vaccines that have come out over the last several years. We had the monkeypox little spike that went on last year. And within 30, 45 days, largely, there was vaccinations that were being released, right? All of the different booster shots and how we roll those out, it gave us, I don't think we'll be as reactive and more proactive as we lean into that space in the future.
Chief, I've heard you use the phrase lead with grace on more than one occasion. You made reference to it during the course of this interview. Could you just share with us where that came from, what you mean when you say that? It resonates with me. I know it resonates with others. So if you could share that, and also just maybe a couple of examples of when you've seen someone lead with grace.
Well, I would like to say that I was smart enough to come up with that on my own, but I didn't. That was all my mama, right? And she didn't say lead with grace, but going on, I can remember around the house, like, well, we'll give grace, right? And over the years, as I took in some of those lessons in my career, and I thought about, just, I say manage your expectations, and it evolved over the years to the lead with grace because it's complicated what we do. It's emotional. We never have enough money. We never have enough people. I just don't want to ever forget that we're not too big. Don't get too big for your britches, basically what my mom used to say, right? Be humble, be aware, be sympathetic, empathetic, right? Just get informed about what's going on, and it helps you with your decision making. And I say lead with grace because I feel like medics got smacked in the back of the head the last 5 years. And let's not forget what we went through, and that anybody that's in this career field, anybody that's a medical professional wants to help, right? And it's not helpful to be aggressive and unprofessional and just, I got it. We got to get reps and sets. It's so impersonal to me. It's like, where's the person in that? Look at the person that you are dealing with, and let's give grace. Lead with grace. We're at a point in that we can make a decision, and why wouldn't we err on the side of the airman, soldier, and sailor that are at the deck plate or at the bedside doing that, right? Why are we beating them up over Dimmer's eye? Why are we beating them up over metrics that we know haven't been good for 30 years, right? Let's step back from it and remember when we were in their shoes. That's what I'm trying to get people to remember. And there are less resources now than there've ever been. So now, if there was ever a time to have grace, it's now, right? And that's what it speaks to me. And I will tell you, I do see it every day. And the director is, to me right now, because she's my closest touch point, is the perfect example of that. Going to our most senior leaders in the department and saying, we have to have a different value proposition on how we deliver care. When you know their focus is on saving money, cutting manpower, right? And just being brave enough to say, this is not how we do that. That's grace. And that's thinking about the healthcare professional and knowing that you're putting something in that space that takes care of people, right? Takes care of people before they're sick. That's not what our most senior leaders wanted to hear. They wanted to hear how we were going to save billions of dollars because it impacts the lethality of their force. And I get that. But having that grace and, having the gumption to go up and say, got it, but this is what we really need to do. This is what we owe our beneficiaries. That is, if I haven't seen grace, that's it, right? And I hope to be able to live up to that and keep giving that same level of grace to our teams as I move forward.
So what would you say to a young Tanya Johnson in high school or in college, maybe not with that family legacy of service, so you don't know anything about military medicine, about the military, and you've got this young high schooler in front of you who's saying, you know what, I've heard that military medicine might be an option for me. How would you encourage them, or what advice would you give?
Do it. Take a chance. Jump. This is the thing, right? If you are really, really want to get back to your country, want to be a part of something bigger than yourself, this is for you. And while you're at it, they're going to give you an education. They're going to give you skill sets that are just priceless. I'm like 30 years in, they spent millions of dollars on me. They might want their money back in the end, but they've spent millions of dollars investing in me. And knowing that you have an organization that's willing to invest in you, to make you a better person, to make you a leader, to make sure that you have all the knowledges and tools to do your job. And all those things, the traditional things, will still be there available to you, because you're still going to get the opportunity to go to college, because they're going to encourage you to do it, because they want you to be the best that you can be. And so I feel like that's the Army tag. Sorry, that's not where I wanted to go with that, but it just popped in my head. No, but it is going to make you the best that you can be, right? It's really going to pour into you like you never realized. I have gone out on some recruiting days and just told them I probably would have done it right from graduation day. Graduate next day on the bus or actually, I was still in San Antonio, so I would have walked across the street. Actually, my grandmother actually worked in my DFAC at basic training. That's a little known fact. I would have done it sooner. I stalled. I did everything. No, I'm not going to do that. I just had ambitions to be a red carpet diva before I did it. It didn't work out for me. But just really realistically, just showing them how this is going to pay dividends in their future and what they get out of it. I think they want to know that. What's in it for me? And you can show them the rundown. If you stay 4 years, this is what you're going to get out of serving your country. If you stay 30 years, this is what you're going to get out of serving your country, right? And I think having somebody to speak that just passionate about it, it's infectious. People want to know what it's about. If nothing else, they'll be curious. And maybe at 4 years, I might have slashed tires because they didn't get the same thing out of it that I got out of it. But I mean, so far, the people that I've talked to have not been disappointed.
Yeah. Sort of a follow on to Doug's question. is what advice would you give a young service member, someone who's signed up, officer or enlisted, on how to have a rewarding and successful career in military medicine?
I tell them the same thing that my dad told me: make the career your own. Make it your experience, right? Don't live through somebody else's drama or woes or grief. Don't get bogged down in that, right? And then manage your expectations. There's going to be some times where it's not about you, right? You're going to love you, but it's not going to be about you or your opinion. And then I think back to there's a Chief Master Sgt, Jerry Loeffner, and he said to me early in my career, silence is your acceptance. I tell you right now, he regrets he ever taught me that, right? Knowing when to use your voice, right? Know when it's your time to use, and speak up. Speak up when you have that opportunity or you lose that opportunity. And those three things kind of ground you. I have friends now that are long retired or some that are about to retire, and they're like, well, how are you? Like, you never complain about it. I go, well, first of all, I don't feel like they owe me anything. I don't feel like anything's owed to me. If anything, I feel like I owe back, right? And for that, I know when to use my voice, and I use it when it's my time to talk. I manage my expectations. And as my dad would say, if you expect for them to interpret it the way you do, communicate it the way you do, or execute the way you do, you better expect to be disappointed, right? And that's where we give grace and we coach through that. And so if they have that just foundational things, and I know it's as simple as worry about the things that you can control, but most people don't want to hear it like that, but you have to have somebody that is just that real in the conversation and say those uncomfortable things to you while you're moving through it. And I had people that would remind me, you're making this about you, or this is not about TJ, right? And I am so grateful for that. And then I remind the young airmen, what are you expecting from this? What do you think that they owe you? They don't owe you anything. You get a paycheck, you get medical care, you get all of the things. You get to your uniform, so you don't have to pick out clothes in the morning. You already know what you're going to wear to work every day. I mean, how bad could that be? And I think that for the people, I've got who I consider one of my success stories, who's now a Chief Master Sergeant on the Air Force Medical Service side for clinical laboratory. But he was one of my young airmen that was just like, this is not for me. And now here he is 20 years later, and he's a Chief Master Sergeant. All of it was like, okay, this isn't about you, manage your expectation, all those same things, and drilling that home. And I've gone to hear him speak, and he says the same thing. And so I got copyright on that, but it's just keeping it simple for them and just helping them just one day at a time. Focus on today. I just need you to focus on today. We get through today, and then we'll worry about tomorrow. And we'll just keep doing that each day, right? And keep moving.
So we have some younger listeners who may be earlier in their careers in the military or even considering careers in the military, and they haven't had the opportunity or privilege to deploy. And a lot of times on War Docs, we ask our guests, are there any memorable or just crazy deployment stories that you'd be willing to share that you say, this was just an amazing thing that happened that would never happen had I not been deployed?
I will tell you the most amazing experience I had is during Ebola. I was a Senior Master Sgt. E8 at the Air Force, and we were watching the news about the Ebola outbreak, and it was maybe 4 days later, my commander and I was on a rapid deployment team called a Global Response Force is what the Air Force called it. And it's just a team that contains medics. We can build our own facility. We set up, we're ready to see patients in 12 hours, all the way up to a 5-bed ICU, 25-bed inpatient. And so we get this call, and they're like, you're moving forward. You're going to go to Liberia. We don't know where in Liberia. There are 20 Army people there right now. They're stuck in country. You got to go. And just kind of sitting there and picking the team members and building it, not knowing what we were going into. It wasn't a traditional deployment. We don't know who has base operating support, any of it. All I can think about is I got to take 33 medics into country, me and the commander, and get them out alive without Ebola. That's my job. They said, you'll be on the ground 10 days tops. You're going to go, and the public health services will come in and take over the facility that you built. But while you're there, you got to establish resupply for them. You've got to get local contacts for them. And oh, by the way, it's monsoon season. And so it's going to be 10 inches of rain every morning. And then it's going to be 5,000 degrees in the afternoon. And it felt like 5,000 degrees every afternoon. And we get there, and I can remember that first night we get there, like, oh boy, we're not in Kansas anymore. And they take us to a compound. I have this medical team, so I bring docs with me because I'm like, what in case we need sick call? I don't know what kind of medical support we have. We know we have the UN there, but we don't know who they are yet. And we've got these 20 Army people that are stuck there. And what do they need? And literally that next morning, we get there that afternoon or evening, we go to bed so that we can try to figure it out the next day. The lady at the hotel comes and knocks on the door and says, there's soldiers here for you. It's like, oh boy. Who knows who I am already? And I go down, and they're there for sick call. They're like, you brought medics. We've got somebody who's got a tooth issue. We've got somebody who's running a fever. And what is one of the symptoms of Ebola is fever, all these different things. And I'm just trying to keep everybody with 10 fingers and 10 toes during that time and not know what the landscape was going to be. And I hadn't even talked to even anyone in leadership yet. Me and my commander were like, what? This is like being on Mars right now. And then they gave us the old school cell phones where you have to push the button 15 times to get to the letter that you want for the text message. Oh my goodness. I mean, I loved every second of it. I know I'm making it sound horrifying. And my boss like, you are loving this. I said, I am. Even right to the nights where it was 5,000 degrees and the only place you could get internet is in the hallway. And my team is wanting to get in the pool. And I'm like, if you get in the pool, you don't get back on the plane. And of course, because you just don't know what the water is like. You don't know any of those things. And then very quickly it came down to, I've got to get this team off the ground. I can't wait for U.S. Public Health Services to get here. The biggest threat is they're going to die in a traffic accident because there really weren't no traffic laws. I got to keep them from catching Ebola. All they want is something to eat that isn't an MRE. Before the 1st Battalion showed up, we really, with those 22 Army members on ground, I sent my public health people out into the city to clear restaurants for the people that were going to be coming in, inspect, do all of that hygiene, public health stuff that normally doesn't happen for them. Sending my medics to the hotels to do sick calls. And then when rain stopped, load everybody up, go out and build the compound, right? Because we were going to build the Alaskan tent shelters for what they called the Monrovian Medical Unit. And then during this whole time, you had UN, we're on CNN getting feedback because we're putting Constantine. Why are they keeping the Americans in? Are they keeping the Americans out? I mean, it's just so much drama. The news was watching us. And I'm like, how are our photos even getting out there? We were showing up on news clips and making sure people just behaved. But the untraditional experience showed me the resiliency because I found CB somewhere and said, hey, can you come build, latrines on this site? The relationship building, bringing in Army, let me tell you, my battles can get some stuff done. They will kick in a door and find whatever you need. And they would show up every day. Sergeant Johnson, what do you need? Colonel Fry, what do you need? And it was the best experience of my life. I'm telling you what, just to see how people pivoted and moved, the conversations, it didn't matter what was on the other side of us, right? All it mattered is it said US and they were moving out and they were getting it done. There was nobody was in their feelings that you had an E8 saying, I need this, and I need it right now. Nobody did that. And I wish that opportunity was more of the deployment opportunity where it's really just bare basic grassroots of things that nothing actually exists. You go in now, you have brick and mortar, you're not sleeping in tents anymore. I know that when I finally deployed as a Chief Master Sgt, I had a nice Cadillac trailer with my own bathroom in it. I was like, this is not the deployment experience. In my head, I was ready for Tent City. I was disappointed. that Ebola experience, even now, it's funny that I run into people here in the agency, and we have our U.S. Public Health Services officers that actually went and worked in that facility that my team built, those 33 medics built, and the lives that they saved, shared pictures and things for all the things that we left behind for them. Just hands down, that is something that I'm going to bore the heck out of people at the pharmacy when I retire talking about.
Well, I love that story. And the one thing that is such a common thing about deployment stories is just the team nature. It doesn't matter if you're part of the Air Force or Army or Navy or Marines, you're on the team, and that team gets stuff done. And that's just I love listening to that story, because that's what your team did, and you just fell in and did it.
Yeah. I mean, best experience. Highlight was half the team, all but 5 of us, left within like 12 days. The rest of us, we got stuck there for like 40 days. I was like, do people even know we're here? Just get us out of the country. And 95 days later, we finally went home.
Well, that's another common military thing too. So when the history books are written 100, 200 years from now, how would you like your legacy in military medicine to be recorded?
Gosh, I just hope they say I did good, that I did good. She meant what she said, and she said what she meant, and she was just genuine about how she moved. Really, I just want to do a good job, right? I don't want to disappoint. This is my legacy, really. How many people can we find that were born into MHS, that spent their life growing up in it, then served in it, and then I'll retire from it? So no matter what, from cradle to grave, this is what I know. And hopefully I just leave it better than when I got here. I just want to leave it better. And hopefully whoever watching, they're proud of what I've done. You're going to make me emotional. My mascara's going to run.
We've got...
Yeah, you just... I think...
No, that was... You could have... I mean, I knew that question was coming, but whoa. No, but no.
Yeah, it's from the heart. Yeah. You lead with grace, Chief. Lead with grace. That's what you're going to do. Yeah. God bless you.
Well, we've been speaking with Chief Master Sgt. Tanya Johnson on War Docs podcast. Chief Johnson, thanks again for sharing your experiences and insights with us, and thank you for your service to this nation.
I'm honored and humbled to be able to do it.
Thank you for listening to War Docs. We sure hope you enjoyed it. War Docs is a nonprofit organization supported by donations from listeners like you. Please follow and subscribe to our show on whatever platform you consume your podcasts, and rate and review this episode, and share the show with your contacts on social media. Find out more information about our show, our guests, and how to become a member of Team War Docs on wardocspodcast.com. Thank you for your support. If you like war stories and medical drama, War Docs has you covered. Spread the word.